forgot to show you there's a way to do that before.
Hi everybody, I'm just waiting for that little button to pop up. Why isn't it? Oh, there we go, share to group. Oh.
That's not it?
Nope.
Sorry.
That's right. It's right here. Share to group. Braveheart Conversations.
Yeah, there's a way to do that before. I looked it up.
Oh. All right, guys. Whew, we're excited to be here this morning. We have a sensitive topic today. We'll go ahead and introduce ourselves first. This is Braveheart Conversations, episode 38. I am Jillian Aurora, and I'm here with my co-host, Marie Wallace.
Hello.
And we are happy that you are joining us from whatever platform you are joining us on today. We go live every Thursday morning, and very grateful for the people that hop on and have this conversation with us live. We are also on Podbean, Spotify, and iTunes, so we have lots of ways to find us. And you can find us on our Facebook group where you can join discussions and see all of these lovely live videos. You can find us at facebook.com/groups/Braveheart Conversations. So with that, let's go ahead and jump into our topic. First of all, I just want to say that this is called Braveheart Conversations. We are committed to showing up brave, and there are some times that conversations come up when I don't feel ready for them. But because events are happening around us all the time, I don't get to choose that timing. And sometimes the conversations that need to be had aren't on my timing. And so today we're going to be talking about something that's hard. It's not something that's comfortable to talk about. And it's something that's very necessary to talk about. And so we had some events, some really horrific, brutal events that happened because of racism and police brutality. I'm sure nobody is unaware of what has happened, and there's a lot of division around it. And it's easy for us to just be quiet. It's easy for me to justify because I can say, well, that doesn't have anything to do with my business, right? And
Right.
You know, my niche, the thing that I like to talk about is women's rights, and so I don't have to touch this. But here's what convicted me is I happen to think very, very highly of men who stand for women's rights, even though they could say, not my issue, not my topic. I don't rape women, I don't abuse women, so I don't need to talk about it. But do you know how much I appreciate men who do show up and have the difficult conversations and say, I'm a feminist, or I stand for equal women's rights? That means the world to me. So in that same breath, we're going to have this conversation messy, and I'm going to say some things I'm sure that people will say your privilege is showing, and it will, because generationally that's where I've come from. I'm white. I do show up with privilege. There are things I don't have to worry about. I live in Boise, Idaho, which is like all white. I've seen some racism. I didn't ever have to experience that personally. But I've worked with a lot of refugees, and I've had my own experiences with seeing the harm and hurt that that people can just really flippantly, they can hurt other people so easily and come with such judgment and assumption. So I'm going to practice what I preach today and say, you know, I'm going to open up a conversation because the conversation gets to be had, even if some people may not agree, and even if people may not like me from either side of the aisle. So, Marie, I know you've had some experience in speaking about this as well. This is a topic that we've both seen and experienced from our own perspectives. And I'm doing a lot of talking right
No,
now.
you're doing a good job. I think what I want to add to that is that opening the conversation allows us to bring awareness to something, just like having men who stand up for women and they go to different activities that help bring about not only awareness, but awareness to the issues, but awareness as to how we can start solving this I don't know what I want to call it. We can just stop some of what's going on from happening by opening up at this conversation. So I think it's just real important to keep having those. I have been on panels where we talked about gender equality, and there's a lot of misperceptions out there, even when we do come from a place of, I was on a panel in India, and they thought that here in the United States that women were equal because we live in a state of privilege. And so I just know that there's a lot of conversations to have around there, and the more that we can open that up, we can build the awareness, and we can do we have a lot more advantages here in the US? Yes, we do, than in other countries. However, it was just so important to have that conversation, because then it helps everyone on all sides know how to enter the conversation, how to be more aware, what to read, how to perceive things.
Yeah, we cannot heal without having the conversations. We cannot heal while we still maintain secrets. We cannot heal while we still maintain presence in the shadows instead of being transparent. In the whole gender conversation, part of the conversation is, if there's only awareness in the oppressed gender, women, or whatever minority genders, if there's only conversation in the oppressed perspective, you can only heal so much. The oppressors are the ones doing the violence, right? So it is not just a women's issue, just like this is not just a minority issue. This is a collective issue. We all get the opportunity to heal and grow. So as we talk about power and oppression, I think that there's some really important elements. One of them is just the long-term effects that we've had.
Generations.
So many generations where, like, this isn't a new problem. This is a really old problem. There's a lot of dismissiveness that comes up when people say, well, they're not slaves today. Well, when things show up like this, we get to see right in front of our face that there's still some problems. When someone gets murdered in front of a whole group of people, coldly, cruelly, not heeding any of the pleas, help from the person or people around them, like, we have a problem. It's a big problem. And so I hope that this brings some awareness that there is still a problem. It's not about, well, slavery happened a long time ago.
It's just a different form of slavery.
Yeah. And so we get to acknowledge that there's still a problem today that doesn't get to be dismissed. I also think we get to acknowledge that just because something happened in a family member or past generation, it's still present in us today. There's a lot more information out there about DNA. Like, our trauma is actually embedded in our DNA. I heard something, I think it was yesterday, I was reading a book that a woman who has severe trauma, her child is 8 times more likely to get a terminal illness. 8 times more likely. The child is, without even experiencing any trauma. That's incredible to me. So we do get to acknowledge that there is an element that we are like they were slaves really not that long ago. Their whole race in the USA was incredibly abused and oppressed. And I feel the same way I can relate in my gender, because you know, we've talked about this before as women, like even when you were a young adult, you know, being able to get a bank account wasn't easy.
Yeah, I couldn't get a bank account without my husband.
Yeah. So, I mean, we also feel this very often. Women who are breaking out of oppressive patterns will say, why is this so hard? Like, I get it here, but it's so hard here. It's so hard for me to actually practice what I know. And I believe it's because we do have trauma embedded in our DNA. And
it's systematic too. It's been handed down for generations, certain systems for holding and oppressing people in general. So it's a systemic problem.
Yeah, it's systemic. It is in ancestral DNA. And this is the icky part that I don't want to look at, is that I think our privilege is also embedded in our DNA.
Yes.
So just like they have trauma, like we have just assumptions in the way that we go about our everyday lives. We don't have to assume danger, at least in that way. As a woman, there's certain things that I'm careful of that a man doesn't need to be careful of, right? But as a white person, there are things I don't have to be careful about.
And may not even be aware about.
Nope, I just make those assumptions. So,
well, like you said earlier, we can sit back in the shadows and pretend that it's not happening and that we don't have a part in it, but it will affect our generations as well, from future generations. So talking about it now could start healing things now, and
I find that the things that I don't want to look at, you know, watching that video was hard.
Tough.
It was hard to look at. It really makes my soul grieve. And some of us have the privilege to not look at it. And it's not going to impact me personally, right? That's not something I have to deal with in my life today. But some people, like that's a very real reality they live with every day.
Every day.
So I'm a human being. I'm part of the collective. So if my brother or sister is hurting, I'm hurting. So I think that we get to tap into our empathy. For me, I can feel a connection in this particular topic with this particular minority, even though I'm not a minority and I will never understand what racism feels like. I will never understand that. However, I do understand what it's like to be oppressed as a woman, and so I can find that empathy by finding those connections. You know, I understand what it's like to feel minimized, or I understand what it's like to feel someone else's assumptions of me based on my gender. So I believe that empathy is a great asset for us if we can find those
it's
connections.
A starting place.
Yeah. If we can find within us where we have felt that same pain, and even though it may be different, it shows up different. And I feel for like people who deal with multiple minorities. So they might be a minority race, and they might be a gender that's oppressed, or you know, they might have a disability. There might be so many different things that people identify with. But if I can bridge the gap by having empathy for any of those groups of people, then we all heal more. And I think I can identify what I long for in people who aren't a part of my oppressive issue or status, right? So as a woman, I long for empathy and recognition and acknowledgement. And that helps me heal, and I see healing in them. So that's what I get to offer, because I recognize that's what I long for, so that's also what I get to be.
Well said.
Yeah, so we each have our own, I guess, stories. For me, I grew up in Idaho, and so it was an interesting experience. Maybe we can both kind of share a little bit of our own background. I grew up reading about racism in history books, right? And I thought it wasn't a thing. Mm-hmm. I can remember, I had very few, I had very few friends in general. I was homeschooled, so I didn't get a lot of socialization in general, but I didn't have a wide variety of friends that were different ethnicities. I had friends that were just like me, white and Christian and conservative. They were all kind of cut out of the same cloth. And I didn't really experience racism because there wasn't anything confronting to my identity. Mm-hmm. Then I went to college in Florida, and there was a wide variety of ethnicities and races and languages, and it was very confronting because I really came to the table with this assumption that there's no more racism. That was way in the past. Slavery was abolished, and it was only within like the previous 5 years to me attending that school that interracial dating had been allowed. Mm-hmm. It had been banned, and I was like scratching my head thinking like, what world am I living in? Like, people were still making comments about interracial couples, and it was very bizarre to me. I remember just feeling like, what, this is real? This is still happening? And then as I grew and started my career in the field of social work, I worked with more and more refugees in the Boise area, and I did see how that confronted a lot of people. I did see how people told them to go home. Women who wore a hijab especially were targeted. And that broke my heart because these women were often, they were already being oppressed.
Yeah, they came here to have a different life.
Yeah, and their culture is already oppressive to women. And so then they just got another added element here in the U.S. because the U.S. wanted them to be a certain way. And it was really heartbreaking to me. And it gave me a totally different level of awareness. So I want to hear about some of your background and your experience.
I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, where civil rights was going on in Texas. I was poor, and I went to school. There were all different races there, and so I'm in the thick of things, and I don't understand because I'm a young girl, and I don't understand really the gravity of all that's happening. But I do know that it was heartbreaking to see how people were treated differently. And yeah, there's some of it that I can't talk about today because it's a really tough situation for me. But you could just see that a lot of times people were not treated fairly or equally in all of the situations. And so I saw quite a bit of oppression coming, growing up. And I was fortunate enough to break out of that, and I moved to Idaho because my husband had gotten a job here, and that opened up my eyes to a whole different world. I actually did grow up being oppressed as a female because in my family, which is interesting because my dad had 3 girls and then he had 3 boys, and so he got to see what it was like because he really wasn't ready for girls. And then of course his first 3 daughters are, and we got treated way differently. There were definitely girls' chores, which were about this high, and guys' chores, and theirs were not very big, and we were always expected to do certain things. And because my dad had been married quite a few times, it fell on me to be the mom and the caretaker and all these roles that I wasn't quite ready for. Moving to Idaho, some of my experiences were I didn't see what I saw when I was growing up, all the racial oppression and all ways that people fought and had those things. And so I was blind. My privilege did make me blind in those situations. I was well aware of the oppression happening to women because I was directly involved in many relationships where I didn't feel I could speak up, but that's trauma that I had to learn and grow up and deal with because that was my generational pattern. No woman in my family ever really got to speak up or be heard. As a matter of fact, we were often told to be seen and not heard, and most of the time not even seen. And so, and then I went to school and I studied multicultural because I was really curious about people. I really loved people. I used to follow Charles Kuralt, who would go around America getting people's stories, and that was the curious part. And then I started working in schools that were underprivileged. And that's where as a teacher, I got to see some things that were really heartbreaking, seeing that there were kids that didn't have enough food and kids that didn't have parents that were able to take care of them because they were working. And so you see the oppression of the poor. And then I'm reading a book one day in one of the schools, and a kid goes, well, it was a story about a little boy, and he goes, well, why is that little boy brown? Because he had never seen a brown person. And I was shocked because I go, that's how oblivious they were. So they weren't even being exposed to other religions. So background, and I have worked with refugees. I have worked in some of the lower income schools and seeing some of the things going on, and doing my best to open conversations and make a difference with what I'm able to, using my privilege. But I know I am nowhere near where I need to be of service in this conversation. So.
Well, you are just by being in this conversation.
By being in this conversation. It's rough, you guys. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard, especially as, sometimes you feel like the stakes are high. It's hard to have these conversations, very confronting, because the stakes are high. Who am I going to lose? Who's going to disagree with me? Who am I going to offend? And that's what keeps us quiet. And if I know one thing, if I know one thing, it's that all of those pressures to stay silent, they are liars. They're liars. Mm-hmm. And there may be some pushback, but not nearly the consequences that there would be.
Well, nothing's going to change. Nothing will change if we sit back in silence, because like you said, the oppressed will stay oppressed because they're having the conversations mm-hmm. among themselves, and no one else is being entered in there mm-hmm. on their behalf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same kind of conversation I have regularly with women who have been abused or gotten out of toxic relationships. Is they often will give me every excuse why they want to be quiet and just move on and not make waves and it's over with. And the thing is, if people don't ever talk about the abuse that they had, the abuse is able to continue. There are many people who have not been called on the carpet for the abuse that they have created over and over and over in so many different victims. And so we get to stop being silent. And in this particular situation, I'm not a victim. I'm not. In fact, people could say I'm on the other side of the street because I'm white and I'm privileged. And so this is how I break that barrier, is my privilege allows me to be silent. And by choice, I will not be silent.
Well, imagine if the Me Too movement hadn't happened. Mm-hmm. That one woman who was brave enough to bring it up. Those abusers that have since been jailed would still be abusing. Mm-hmm.
So I think, just like I want a man who, let's say, a man makes a locker room comment, right? No big deal, just being a guy. And another guy says, hey, you know, man, that's not really cool. I want to like tear up for that man. Like I feel so they're an ally, and I love that. Not that makes them one of us, not that they've been
or
victimized,
that he'll ever understand.
but I mean, that's so meaningful to me. So I know that because that's meaningful to me, I want to be that for somebody else. And I understand that doesn't take away the pain. I understand, like, that's not me, like, being able to save and rescue them. I don't need to save and rescue. They're doing their own work to advocate for their own rights. And I simply play a supportive role. I can't be a savior for them. I'm fully aware of that. All I can do is voice my support of them. Let me check in and see if we've got any questions. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Hello, Mandy. Oh, my finger's like sticking to the screen. I'm just browsing for comments. I see all of you guys. Thank you for being here. Crystal, yep, I also get the message. Children should be seen and not heard. Yes, very detrimental. Yep. All right, it doesn't look like we've got any questions. So, I guess all I want to say in wrapping up is just some solutions. What role, if we've missed any, what have we missed in how we can play a role moving forward in the solution? Right now, our country is really in pain. We're seeing a lot of anger and riots that are all justified.
Yes.
We are not yet seeing justice for the innocent man that was murdered brutally. So
senseless.
It was really senseless. So I guess I'm left feeling pretty helpless. Helpless is a good word, because it feels like it's not enough to just have a conversation. But I'm at a loss.
And maybe
to know.
some of you out there do have an idea of, you know, how we can open it up or have the conversation at a deeper level. But we're opening that up too, because we're always we're ready and willing to have a conversation if that comes up. And as tough as it may be, we know that you may have some awareness that we don't have, and something that needs to be put out there that we don't know or understand, or may have neglected. Because, like, you know, Jillian started the conversation about we're going to be clumsy because we do have white privilege and we don't really understand all that's on the table. We get that and understand that, but we're willing. And I think that's part of the conversation too, is, you know, we're willing and open to see what that could look like and what we can do.
Yeah, so we'd love to hear any of your suggestions or solutions, and really just asking that question, like, how can we serve? How can we serve? How can we be a part of the solution?
I mean, without all the feminists in the 60s and 70s, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now, right? So someone somewhere stepped up, and that's...
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of fear right now as a white woman. There's a lot of fear because I've seen people step out as anti-racist and be annihilated online. And so, you know, there's both sides here where I'm like, I want to speak because that is what is my integrity. That's where I feel I need to not be operating in my privilege by being silent. There's also that human side of me that's fearful of, like, I'm really screwed if I do or screwed if I don't, right? So I understand the murky waters that we're trying to clumsily navigate. So it's not worth it to be silent. And it's also like, you know, this part of me is like, please be kind, like, please be gentle, because we're opening this conversation in a way that we don't really even know how to serve you best. So anyway, those are our ramblings for today. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for being a part of this vulnerable conversation, because I know I'm not the only one uncomfortable. There's a lot of us out there who don't know what part to play in this. So, you know, give us some love if you're feeling that way too. Give us some suggestions, give us some feedback, and, you know, as always, we love to hear from you in whatever capacity. So if you feel challenged by this, or you feel like this inspires some other question, we really want to hear it.
That's good.
Yeah. So if you do want to send us a question or a comment, you can reach me at defytheaverage@gmail.com, or you can reach
Marie at mariesgold.com.
And of course, you can follow us on our Facebook page, where you can answer, or you can ask questions there or join in the discussion. And that is facebook.com/groups/Braveheart Conversations. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up, and we will see you all next week. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.